Any of the cheeses meltable?
Yes, some of them are. The ones that Montego was going to make are better as far as meltable, but there are some in those, well, I know what page, I don't think I did print out. No, I did. I printed out some of the recipes, but I also, mine's going blank, printed out a sheet that has 3 cookbooks listed on it. The one that's on the table that has a little sticky note that says you can get it used on Amazon, you can't buy new anymore. It's my old one that I got the jack cheese recipe out of. But the lady that made that book has another one that's called the Ultimate Cheese Book, Cookbook, which is got even more recipes in it than that one does. And it has also recipes that you use the cheeses in. Then there's the other cookbook that's out on the table, which is that one, Cheese in an Hour, or whatever it's called. That one, I did make the cheddar one that I didn't cook quite long enough. That one was done with agar, and I'm still learning how to use agar. Agar can be tricky, and I didn't cook it quite long enough, so it didn't set as much. It's my cuttable that ended up being a spreadable cheese. And then the other cookbook that's listed on that page is the one that Montego works out of, and I have that one on my Kindle. I don't have it in paper form. But that one, Rejuvelac, which is what they use to culture the cheese, makes it a long process, because basically what you're doing is you're taking grain, and it can be wheat or it can be a grain that's doesn't have gluten for the gluten-free folk, and you basically ferment it. You wash it a couple times like you're sprouting, but once it sprouts, you put water in it, put it away for a few days, then wait for the water to get cloudy. When the water gets cloudy, then it's ready to use. And it has a tanginess kind of like lemon juice does, only what it does with the proteins that you're mixing it with is you end up with something that's much more like cheese rather than what you find in lots of the other cheeses is if you go over a little bit with the lemon juice, you get a lemon tang to it instead of that robust flavor that cheese has. You get a tang instead. So people like it more, but it's a much longer process because it can take you anywhere from 2 to 6 days to make the Rejuvelac, and then you're gonna make your cheese, and it has to sit for a day or two, depending on how tart you want your cheese to be, how much aged flavor you want to it. So it's not something I would do. Something she really has some favorites in there that she does, and that's what I was hoping she was going to be able to show you guys and let you sample them, because she says they have a brie. She says it's just like eating brie, but it's plant-based. Unfortunately, we don't have those for you today. So I think maybe we'll do the demonstrations first, and then we can, well, I don't know, do the demonstrations last. We're going to go ahead and talk about gluten-free. I'm sure you noticed all the things I have out here in front. This has been an adventure for me because I don't have to worry about being gluten-free. But we have people in our church that are gluten-free, so when potluck, they're going, well, what can I eat? Ethel's been asking me that because she's only just recently had to cut out gluten, so she's very conscious about what's in every dish. And so this was it was good for me because I understand it a little bit better. And you're going to find in your handbook, in your book, some really good information that I was able to get on just general information on why people go gluten-free. What conditions do they have? Sometimes it's an allergy, sometimes it's celiac disease. So, there are many different causes and reasons why people go gluten-free. And there's a sheet on foods to avoid. There's a really interesting one, and if you really want to think about it, read what it says about buying gluten-free foods. You have to be careful because sometimes it will say it's gluten-free and it's not. So you need to check the ingredients on the labels, even when they say they're gluten-free. What makes something gluten-free, like oatmeal, oh, I didn't have it in a bag, I bought a bulk. Oatmeal should be gluten-free. Oats don't have gluten. But if they're processed in a plant that also does wheat, there's cross-contamination, which is why if you go down to Winco, you will see a bulk thing for rolled oats and quick oats, and then you will see one that says gluten-free oats.
Oh.
Because the others are produced in plants where there may be cross-contamination, and if you're really sensitive, and I know Tammy is really sensitive to gluten, she would have to watch that because she may find cross-contamination with something. If they have put this little seal on here, like Bob's Red Mill does on his, it says gluten-free, and it should be processed in such a way that there is no cross-contamination. There are lots of flours and things that you can use in place. I discovered brown rice flour, which I had never used before. This one is interesting because this says gluten-free, and it's actually a blend of flours. There's rice flour, white rice flour, brown rice flour, potato starch, sorghum flour, tapioca flour in here. And one of the things that I was reading was saying some of the recipes for the cheeses said if you use this recipe was made with Bob's Red Mill flour. She says all gluten-free flours are not made equally because they may have used different flours in their particular blend. So, something I got. There was something that I bought that I was surprised. This one's chickpea flour. We all know about chickpeas. We use them a lot. This one has just garbanzo beans in it. But there was something that I had gotten that actually had, oh, I know, it was, I picked up some oat flour, but it wasn't pure oat flour, I discovered when I looked at it. Because I had a recipe that was calling for oat flour, and I thought, okay, well, so I ended up making my own oat flour by putting oats in the blender and blending them until I had flour. It's a little more cumbersome, but it works when you can't find, because I couldn't find any oat flour anywhere. Almond flour gets used a lot. I don't know if you tried the cake. I really like that cake. It's just crumbly and the flavor is just wonderful. But it's not, it doesn't hold together like a normal cake does either. It makes a very moist cake. So
isn't it the gluten that holds it together?
The gluten's what holds things together, yeah. So if you're going to be doing vegan, you're not going to put an egg in. You're going to have a recipe that doesn't call for eggs. And it doesn't necessarily call for flax or chia seed either, although one of the recipes, the cookies that everybody likes, the gingerbread cookies, those have chia seed in them, ground chia seed in place of the egg, like we learned at the other class when we did eggs replacement. So anyhow, you have some really good things on here. There's a nice thing about how and when to substitute gluten flour, gluten-free flours in baking. The almond flour one, there's facts about that. Oh, this one about when to use gluten-free flours. I thought this was interesting because I got this off on Martha Stewart website. And then if you read the disclaimer on it, she's getting a kickback off of the people whose flours she promotes. So just know that when you read this one. She's saying, oh, this is a really good flour, but they're paying her to say it's a really good flour. I went ahead and printed it because I liked some of the information in it. But, you know, like I said, remember, read your labels, look for those ingredients, and to find out what exactly is in something, because that was the biggest thing that I found, was that they caution people over and over and over again, read labels, read labels, read labels, because gluten can be hidden in so many places. And there's one little sheet we have in here. It says 10 surprising places gluten may be hiding. Beans and rice, cereal, fries. Did you know that most French fries that you get at fast food places have gluten? Because they've used flour to keep those potatoes to stay apart when they go to put them in the fat to fry them. Soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and salad dressings can have it. You can use liquid aminos in place of soy sauce. I thought it was interesting because my Chickpea soy sauce is not gluten-free.
They do have a gluten.
Do they have a gluten-free one? Okay, the one I have at home isn't. So I used liquid aminos and I used coconut aminos in one of my recipes. Both of those work just as well. The coconut has a little milder flavor. Sushi, candy, potato chips, sausage meats, and deli meats, because they use textured vegetable protein, which is usually made from wheat, as a filler. Miso, and this is miso, and this one is, they said, they kept recommending the ones that were made from garbanzos. Find those in a minute. Really? It's the first time I've got, oh, I know, the lid on the, it was on the wrapper, I took off the ingredients. And they also said to watch out for mislabeled, misshelved, and mispackaged products. It does happen that sometimes they will label something as gluten-free and what they've put in the package isn't. And there's no way you can know that, of course. But if you have a really sensitive palate, you may want to be a little more careful or watch what it says. It says, some companies make both gluten-free and gluten-full and gluten-free products, and their packaging looks nearly identical. I don't know about you, but I have had more times when I've gone to pick up something at the store and I wanted 3 of them, right? So I picked 3 in a row, and then when I got home I discovered the one in the middle was not like the other 2. And it's like, oh, crumb, you know. Some grocery stores mistakenly put gluten-full products in the sections marked gluten-free. So don't assume that everything that's on the shelf where it says gluten-free might be gluten-free. And some products list gluten in the ingredient label on the back, but erroneously say gluten-free on the front. So, you know, read every label, ask questions, be sure you know what you're getting when you get it. And I want Tammy to come up. Tammy was my first gluten-free person I met, and she's taught me a lot, and she's been doing this for 20 years, so she knows it inside and out. And so I would like her to tell you a little bit about her journey and how she got to what she had to do to her diet and how she has dealt with that. And then you can ask her questions as well.
Okay, thanks. So, does anyone know what celiac disease is? Are you familiar with it? So, it is, obviously I can't have wheat, but it's an autoimmune disease that attacks your intestines and digestive tract. So, and 1 in 100 people have it. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. And then the other thing I was thinking about today, because my daughter's been sick, so she ended up in the hospital this last week, and they said, oh, she has IBS, which I kind of suspected, but almost all of the autoimmune diseases you shouldn't eat gluten. It's the number one thing they'll tell you to avoid. And I just learned, a friend of mine has Hashimoto's. She said, the doctor said, hey, number one thing you can do is avoid gluten. And she thought, what? I thought, what? But it's also an inflammatory. So that's just a little bit of, upfront information. So back, I can't remember how long, I guess probably in 1999, I'd had my son, and not too long after, they say celiacs can be triggered by traumatic events. So if your body has gone through a childbirth, a surgery, anything like that. I had a C-section with my son, and then the next year when we traveled, I would get sick. And I would get sick even if we ate out. My stomach started hurting. But anyway, then the bathroom issues began, and that was really bad. Then I became very, very, even deathly anemic. So the doctor started me on IV iron infusions. I did them 8 months. I did them for 8 years, every month and in between. And then I have blood transfusions in between. So it was that severe. So I did that. I started in 2001. I was not diagnosed with celiac till 2006. And back then it was still at the point where doctors didn't believe that gluten would cause health problems. They really, even to this day, you're fine. To this day, even then, there are some doctors that don't believe nutrition really has anything to do with your health, which is just absolutely absurd to me. But being diagnosed with celiac, when I had a friend who said, I think you have celiac. And how everybody thinks, oh, they've got what I have. And that's kind of what I thought. Oh, she thinks everybody's got it. No, she was right. I really did have it. And I had a nurse practitioner. I had to go to an oncologist, a hematologist, and even he didn't pick up on it. And so I finally got tired of it and went to another doctor, and she said, this is actually a nurse practitioner, and she said, I want to check you for some zebras, just unknown, uncommon illnesses. And celiac was on the list. As soon as I saw it, I thought, she's right, that's what I've got. And sure enough, so they said, go on a gluten-free diet. If it makes a difference, we'll know that you can't have it. So I went on it for 2 weeks, immediately got better, started improving. And then I went back to her, and she said, now you have to go off of it. Because in order to be diagnosed with it, you have to do a scope, endoscopy, colonoscopy. And I said, I'm not going off this. You're insane. And she said, you have to. And I said, no, I don't. But I still tested positive. I mean, I was at the high end of the spectrum. So anyway, that's how I got diagnosed. Then it's all of a sudden, what are you going to do? I've got to go out and start eating gluten-free. Well, back then they had nothing hardly. And the food was horrid. So I was like, how am I going to do this? So I did some research, started reading, thought, I've got this, I can do it. Went to the grocery store, I loaded up on groceries that I could have. Got to the front, and all of a sudden kind of had a little moment where I freaked out and thought, okay, what if I don't have it right? I'm going to spend this money and then not. I literally left my cart and walked out the door. And I pretty much just stuck to, is where I'm at now, is really whole food plant-based eating. And I really just keep it as clean as possible. And I've gotten to where even now I make my own sauces and my own, I get where I can make it in a blender. I know what goes in it. Because like Lorraine said, there's a lot of times they'll say something's gluten-free. And I just recently heard, a couple months ago, them saying on the news something about not being required to put certain things on labels. And I thought, oh, that's going to be a problem. So I thought, I'm going to start making my own sauces and everything. So that's what I did. I still will eat, ketchup from the store, things that I know are gluten-free. But if there's any question, like Lorraine said, I was looking at a protein powder, it says gluten-free on the label. This is a health food company. And the back of it's got barley in it. So I didn't get it, obviously. But I mean, learning to just read your labels is important. But anyway, so yeah, they didn't have anything 20 years ago, hardly. They've come a long ways now. And they have some really great gluten-free options out there. The brownies I made, I should have taken a picture of the label. It's one I hadn't used before, and it was instead made with soy flour. And I had never used soy flour for anything. So it worked pretty good. There are some good options. And Lorraine was saying she felt like she was a chicken running around with her head cut off today. I go for simplicity. If it has more than 5 or 6 ingredients, I really don't use it. I kind of make my own. That's just the way I am. My mom made everything. She never really went by recipes. I think I just inherited it from her. But I keep it as simple as possible. If I can use just the actual herbs rather than packets, I do that. And they make great seasonings and whatnot. But so we've come a long way in, the last 20 years. But I wish you could have seen me 20 years ago when I was trying to do it. It was awful. And so lettuce it was. Lots of salads, rice and beans. I mean, again, packages, you're right, absolutely.
Packaged, you gotta be careful.
Anything packaged. So the funny part was my husband, it's been 20 years, and I love him, but sometimes, still to this day, he doesn't know. And it's been 20 years of doing it. But the funny thing was, I remember him looking on, he bought licorice for me. I'm like, I can't have that. He's like, yes, you can. I'm like, no, I can't. Read the back of the label. Second ingredient, wheat. And he's like, what? How can there be wheat flour in this? And because it's licorice. And he couldn't believe it. Now they have absolutely fantastic gluten-free licorice. They're little Scotty dogs. Now, I don't eat them anymore because it'll spike my blood sugar through the roof. All of this will tonight. But I made an allotment for it. I thought, okay, I'm going to go splurge tonight, so I know what I'm doing. But anyway, what else is there? Ask me questions. Anybody have questions?
The spelt flour is gluten, right?
I've never used spelt flour, and so that it is, I think.
I think
It has
it
gluten.
is. I think it is.
Yeah, I've never used it.
Okay.
I honestly, so I've used this once. Never used chickpea flour, but I kind of made my own brown rice flour. I used to make my own, and this is something interesting too, is I've been asked this, my husband's asked me this too. Why can't, with regular flour, it's one flour. Why not with gluten-free flour? Why are you having to use 3 or 4 or 5 flours to make up one flour? Because they're so incredibly fine. You cannot even, it'll be so soupy if you don't, but if you mix them. So I usually do a mix, like cut for cut kind of thing, and mix brown rice flour, tapioca flour, almond flour, and I think white rice flour, and mix them each, and then mix them in a bag and store it in a container, and it works just fine. So they've taken all the bins out at Broland's because they used to have them there, but COVID took all that away. So now, if I'm gonna do it, I have to buy the packaged stuff, but it's much cheaper to buy it out of the bulk.
Have you tried Winco to see if they have them?
I did, and I didn't see it there.
Okay.
So it could have changed. I mean, they could have it now, but usually they don't. I have gotten the gluten-free oats from there.
Yeah.
That's
I didn't even think to check which kind of flours they had.
right. And so for me, like, proteins are an issue, so I don't break down proteins. So even oatmeal has a vein in it, and that's a protein. I can't eat it very well. And there's a certain percentage of people with celiacs that can't have oatmeal, that they have a problem like I do. My doctors say I'm an anomaly. And so I've always joked that I will surpass every obstacle that comes my way, and I will die choking on a grape. It will be something simple that takes me out path, but I will surpass everything else. But yeah, anything else?
I've been trying to follow the whole foods, plant-based approach. And I'm just wondering, you know, you've named a number of different kinds of flour. Do they use the entire brown rice, for example, or do they remove some of the nutrients in order to keep it from
That's a
spoiling?
good question. I don't know the exact answer to that. I'm sure anything that's processed would remove some of it. It would.
Brown rice would have more than white rice flour would. Just like brown rice has more, they haven't removed all of the good things off of the rice when they do when you get brown rice.
I've even gotten to the point where I don't do a lot of baking anymore. That's just one of those things. I think anybody who's is diabetic gets where they don't do a lot of baking. And I honestly eat probably more salads and fruits and vegetables than anything. I'm like you, so very little meat. I don't 100% not eat meat, but 99. I mean, I'd say I'm 95% plant-based, and it's done wonders for me.
Seems like nearly every day over the last year or two, something comes across my computer where there's another study where they found that the whole food plant-based diet protects you from this, it helps in that, you know, it just seems like there's just study after study after study that is bearing out the fact that that's really the most healthful way to live.
Yeah.
And you know, when you go that way, obviously you want to be sure that that you're getting all of the nutrients. And that's why they talk about whole food, because in so many things they remove something that perhaps would cause it to not to keep as long. But in doing that, you lose the nutrients that your body needs. It's a challenge.
I've done really well with it. I mean, and it's funny because Jillian, as we found out her health issues, it's funny because one thing that calms her stomach is fruit. So seedless fruit specifically. And so it's interesting because I can't buy enough cantaloupe. I mean, I could just buy out the store. She can eat cantaloupe. It's not calms her stomach. It's natural foods that calm her. And I found the same thing. What's really interesting is you go to other countries and they don't have the same problem.
No,
So
because they
our
eat
country,
things more natural.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't want to try and find out. I'd like to go to other countries, but I would be afraid to try just because I'm afraid of what would happen. But it's just our country, we process everything.
We process everything, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay.
And there's some really interesting studies where they have compared the health of people in China, for example,
Right.
and then when they have come across here, compared their health as they have adopted the Western diet. And
It's never good.
And, you know, suddenly they're getting the same diseases that are common here that are totally unheard of there.
Right. And they have the same thing in China. The areas that have adapted meat and dairy are finding they're having the problems we are now. So
Yeah.
it all goes back to what we eat.
Native Alaskans, when they introduced sugar into their diet, which they didn't have as a natural thing, I mean, they eat high-fat diet, but when you put high fat with sugar, you end up with gallstones, which gallbladder disease is a lot bigger there than it ever was before.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I guess my testimony would be that if we follow what Scripture says and eat the things that we've been given, but do so sparingly, and the things that are not what we should have every day, we will lead a healthier,
Much healthier life,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Lorraine, may I just mention something else that we've
Sure.
just recently started doing? Berta will take a bowl and maybe put some,
We're gonna talk about bowls next time. Don't go ruining my next class.
okay,
Before we go on to the other part, I wanted to see if anybody else has ever seen these little gadgets before. Verna hadn't seen it before. I had a garlic press that, you know, after you've scraped the garlic off enough times, pretty soon you get the coating off the outside and they get kind of nasty. So I was looking for a new garlic press. And I found this little gadget. It has these lovely little blades inside. And you open the lid, drop your garlic in, and then you do this. And it chops it up nice and fine. The longer you run it, the finer the garlic is. And then you just open it up and wipe the garlic out of it into your pan. So I bought one for me and one for my daughter for Christmas because I was like, ooh, this is cool. And it works like a dream. And it's really easy to clean because you just take it out, run it under the water, run this under the water, and put it away for next time. So Amazon is where I found that. If you're interested in one, I'm not making anything off of them. I just thought I was using it today, and I thought I'll bet you nobody's ever seen one of these. I was just tickled when I found it. So when we talk about vegan cheeses, one of the things I'm going to use some of the last. I'm almost out of M's gel. I'm going to use M's gel on this one. I'm going to make some jack cheese. You can take some home. I'm going to make jack cheese on this one, which use M gel, or if you don't have M's gel, because they don't make it anymore, I'm working through the last of my supply. Agar. This is agar powder. It also comes in flakes. If you use the flakes, it's 1 tablespoon of flakes is 1 teaspoon of powder. It's not 1 for 1. It's, you know, you just go down in size. So like some of the recipes that I had called for like 4 tablespoons of flakes. Well, that's only 4 teaspoons of this. And it really sets up in a hurry, except in that one recipe that I didn't cook long enough. But
can you recook it?
I've put the smoked paprika on the outside of it now, but I probably could. I don't know why it would hurt it if I did. It would just melt it down, and I just need to. The one book. Alexandra, would you grab the 1 hour vegan cheese cookbook off the table back there? It's on the other side, I think. I like this cookbook for 2 reasons. One, there are cheeses that you can make in a hurry, and some of the cheeses that are in there are ones that will melt like a regular cheese. That one actually would, so you probably can recook it. But the thing that this is 1 hour dairy-free cheese. When you look at the recipes, there's lots of good information on the beginning of this, by the way. When you look at the recipes, you have, your first page has all your ingredients that you're going to use. The second page shows you step by step what you're doing and what it should look like. And I did mine, and it kept saying, well, it should be stringy, and I'm going, am I stringy yet? But I wasn't quite stringy enough. But you can see how it changes from this to what you see down here. It gets into a ball. Then you're taking it and you're adding it to what they call their cheese melt, whatever your flavoring is, whatever type of cheese you're trying to make. You've done part of it in the blender, you've done the agar on the stove, and then you put the agar in, you blend them together, and then you put the whole thing in a pan and you cook it till you get it to the consistency that you want.
What is agar?
What is agar? It comes from
I know what it looks like, but
Yeah.
is it from
It's plant,
a root or a,
from kelp, I think. Where's my phone and I'll tell you. My husband laughs at me because I'm always, question comes up, you know, I don't have to go without answers anymore. I can look things up.
Harold does the same thing. But
It's great.
He should have done it.
He should have done it while I kept talking. He probably can do it faster than I can. Okay, let me make sure that I'm right about what I think agar is made out of, because I've used agar for a long time for other things. Okay, what's it made from? It's a gelatin from the red algae Gluten and Gracilaria. How's that for you? So it's from an algae.
is algae considered plant or animal?
Plant.
I think it's plant.
Algae's not an animal.
Grows.
Animal
Yeah.
would be.
Grow.
Yeah. You look up that one. Okay. As far as I know, algae is a plant. But, so what I'm going to demonstrate are two different kinds of cheeses. This is the first time I have tried making a vegan Parmesan cheese, and every book has a different way of making it. The way I made it, I like. It ended up with this nice little clump of cheese, which you put in the refrigerator, and then you